The Home Secretary has accused Keir Starmer of trying to sabotage her attempts to end the illegal immigration crisis.
Yeah, Suella Braverman claims the Labour leader has a web of cronies who are blocking any effort to stop small boat crossings from Calais.
Which begs the question, which political party would you trust to actually get anything done about this? We're joined now by John Ashmore, the editor of CapX. Good morning, John. Thanks for joining us.
Morning.
That's the big question, actually. It's almost as though nobody, either side of the political divide, seems to be able to actually get anything done about the migrant channel crossings.
Well, the onus is certainly on the party who are actually in government to do something about it. Personally, I think whatever your views on the topic, that blaming the opposition for your policies not being executed properly strikes me as pretty weak tea. And if you read the detail of Suella Braverman's sort of accusation, we're talking about a woman who's a lawyer who was a member of a task force advising the Labour Party. And there's another thing about a Labour councillor who works for a sort of pro-asylum group. This does not amount, in my view, to a web of cronies. It's a couple of people. Obviously, the Conservatives are trying to play on the idea of kind of lefty lawyers who don't like the Rwanda plan and so on. And perhaps there's something there. I think this does resonate with some people. But my overall view is that if you've been in government for more than 13 years, then you have to carry the can for your own policies. They've already got the Nationality and Borders Bill, which was passed last year. We've got an illegal immigration bill going through now. It's ultimately up to the Home Secretary herself and her colleagues to carry things through. There's also an element, I think, of some people think that there's a sort of cynical element, which is that they always knew there would be this kind of legal backlash, and that was part of the plan in the first place. I don't necessarily agree with that, but I could see why people do think that.
Well, John, we saw a couple of weeks ago after the Uxbridge by-election, it came out of CCHQ that they were looking for these wedge issues to create deliberate points of difference between the Tories and Labour. And to be fair, Braverman is not only accusing her of the web of cronies, she's directly attacking Starmer in this exclusive today, which is on the front page of the Sunday Express. She's saying that Starmer has successfully campaigned to halt this government's attempts to deport vile foreign criminals, including rapists and murderers, which is a total betrayal of their victims. She's, of course, referring to a flight in 2020 destined for Jamaica. This is pretty feisty stuff. Do you think this is going to set the pattern for this topic now ahead of the next general election?
Yeah, I think, as you say, after the Uxbridge by-election, there was a piece in the Sunday Times just after that about how, the Conservatives were changing tack and going for more of these kinds of, some people call them kind of anti-woke, but I think it's broader than that. I personally don't think it's a great tactic. I think that people are more concerned about bread and butter issues at the moment, particularly inflation, the cost of living. I think if you are talking about, Keir Starmer's attitudes or whatever to a flight 3 years ago, and people are wondering why they can't pay their bills and so on, they may wonder why you're talking about that and not the more pressing matter. But yeah, I don't think we should be too kind of pearl clutching about this. Politics has always been a bit of a blood sport. There are plenty of people who say this is perfectly fair game. Labour will go after Tory politicians in exactly the same way, and it's always been thus. I just wonder whether it's actually, whatever your scruples, whether it's actually going to be an effective electoral tactic, particularly when you think that Rishi Sunak's whole, reputation and presentation since he's been Prime Minister has been of the competent, calm, steady hand on the tiller. If he now switches and tries to become a kind of culture warrior, it looks a bit strange. He also just doesn't, to my mind, he doesn't have that sort of, if you like, energy about him as a politician. He doesn't come across as someone who is deeply invested in the culture war or in these sorts of issues. So I wonder if there's an element of kind of authenticity that's lacking there as well.
And it's worth pointing out, to echo your point, Anne, if this is a question of capability, it's OK for Braverman to attack Starmer. The fact of the matter is we had a record amount of crossings in July. 3,299 people made the journey in 63 boats, an average of 52 migrants per vessel. So it's all fine and well for the Conservatives to attack the Labour Party. The fact of the matter is a key pledge, one of those 5 pledges, John, was to stop the boats. And on that, the Conservatives are measurably failing.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly my point, Martin. It's that, they've stuck their colours to the mast with, as you say, with those 5 pledges, some of which seemed quite unambitious at the time. Halving inflation, everyone thought, oh, well, that'll be easy. And it's not proving the case. So it's a good example of, be careful what you wish for. But yeah, as you say, I mean, it's their asylum system at the end of the day. It's funny, if you go on, I did a bit of research about the illegal immigration bill. And if you go on the government website, on their own website, it says the asylum system is broken. If you're saying that about your own system, then people are going to wonder why you're trying to blame it on the opposition.
Absolutely, especially to turn around and say that the system is broken when you're the people who've been in government for the last 13 years. I mean, they might have a point if they'd only just got into government, but, for 13 years they could have fixed it. And now they seem to be flailing around blaming the other side. But equally, I mean, Labour last night came out saying that the Tories aren't doing the job properly. They haven't made a success of this. So although you say it may not be top of the issues for the next election, it's certainly going to be in there. And I just wonder what voters are going to feel when they are about to cast their vote. If this issue is important to them, who would they trust most to get anything done about this? What do you think?
No one is my honest answer. I think there's a complete kind of systemic long-term failure here. Some of it's kind of logistical. There just aren't enough staff processing asylum claims. I should just say, I don't think it's not a priority for voters. I think stopping the boats is really clearly a priority for voters. What I question is whether making these sort of slightly spurious accusations about the opposition is a good tactic. I think focusing on it and saying that, they don't have a plan, for example, is perfectly legitimate. And I think a lot of people will look at Labour and Keir Starmer and say, he is clearly not passionate about this issue. He doesn't really seem to have any alternatives to the Rwanda plan. I think, stick on the substantive stuff. And there's a perfectly legitimate argument to be made. But, saying that there's a kind of plot or a web of cronies, to me, just sounds a bit sort of desperate.